Tēnā koutou katoa, nō mai haere mai ki tēnei hui komiti ka waka o te Kanahira. So welcome to this meeting of the Public and Active Transport Committee. We won't be karakia at this point, we already had our open karakia. So we will get underway. As we go into this hui, co-chair Andrew Noon and I want to acknowledge and thank the efforts of our transport team. The operating environment has been difficult for reasons we're all well aware of, and yet here we are with patronage and revenue well up, not only over the quarter or financial year, but also over pre-COVID times and since inception. Notably, problem solving is happening, as we see in today's reports. While I acknowledge the frustrations of customers whose bus doesn't arrive or whose bus drives right past because it's full, reliability has improved, and tricky issues like how to cope with crews, visitors, overloading our system, and have been worked through or are being worked through constructively with all the partners, and outcomes are improving. And for this, we're very grateful. Throughout all this, our program of improvements continues to be delivered, offering a continually upgrading system, including things like e-stops, which will provide real-time info, that real-time info that our riders really want, and also projects such as those that identify issues with bus stops. So we thank you for that as well. I also note improved and improving communications with bus drivers and also with us as a council, recognising, for those that are saying that they've got a problem, that it is a work in progress. So today we're going to open with an operating environment report, which gives us an overview of the wider system that impacts the public transport system and allows us a view of where we sit in that system. We'll note new government directions that may offer new challenges and uncertainties to work through, but I was pleased to note the alignment of ORC's position on the government policy statement for transport with that of our neighbours and with that of the regional staff, our special interest group. So, you know, that's really good. We are aligned across the South Island, really. There are issues with the GPS where there is non-alignment between our planning and the Ministry's outcomes framework, and our submission goes into that. It also suggests that Queenstown PT should be regarded as one of national significance, and that Dunedin's efficiency has a demonstrated contribution to economic prosperity. We are concerned about the lack of focus on coastal shipping and lack of consideration of rail. We've also submitted that active transport investment has substantial positive economic impacts, which is an argument for increased funding for walking and cycling. And we've requested that there is good thought given to any changes to fare setting and fare box recovery policies, which so far are highly tuned and working well in both of our PT settings. The submission from the Transport Special Interest Group is an interesting and thoughtful read, and I suggest people read it because it is interesting, and it also aligns well with our direction of submission. Of particular note in that are clear recommendations that the GPS recognises the importance of public transport to the Minister's direction, and it removes and that they remove the requirement that investment in active transport be excluded from local road improvements and maintenance activity classes, and also that incorrect statements about patronage levels in relation to pre-COVID times be removed. So I guess through all this, we're plugged into the rest of the South with our South Island Regional Transport Chairs Group. Councillor Wilson and I attended that meeting in April where we heard from the Ministry of Transport and also NZTA Waka Kotahi regional managers. The main message from there was that the government's clear intention is to progress the RONs, the roads of national significance, can't say the word, while the rest of us live in a fiscally constrained environment. This report covers that meeting in more detail as well. So finally today, we'll consider some small changes to the procurement strategy that we'll recommend to Council. Getting started with all that, we'll start please with a confirmation, apologies please. We have a list of apologies, got apologies from Lloyd McCall for lateness, Gary Kelleher, Michael Laws and Kevin Malcolm, and thank you very much, Richard, Kate and Gretchen attending online because I know they have work to do further inland.
With those apologies, be accepted, Madam Chief.
Moved. Andrew seconded. Elliot, thank you very much, councillors. Next we have no public forum. Oh, sorry. Put that. All in favour, please say aye.
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 Thanks, Kate. So next, no public forum, confirmation of the agenda. Everybody happy to go with the agenda as published? Thank you. So moved. Councillor Weir, seconded somebody. Councillor Noon, thank you very much. And all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Councillors are reminded to advise of any changes. Nothing there. Presentations, we've got no presentations received. Confirmation of minutes. The minutes of the public and active transport held on 2nd of February be confirmed as a true and accurate record.
Happy to move, Madam Chair.
Moved. Thank you, Councillor Noon.
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. All in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Actions and resolutions of the committee, there were none. So now we head straight into the matters for consideration, and welcome to Transport Manager Lorraine Chand. Over to you, Lorraine. Said my bit about it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've just moved 3 pages into it because you did an excellent
microphone,
introduction to the transport operating environment and coverage of the GPS and the submissions. I really can't add to it. It was very good, but I'm happy to take questions on any or all of those. And then I'll just note in terms of the item on, or the mention in the report on the change to the NLTP/RLTP timeframes. The key point to note from that was it enabled NZTA to submit what we call the SHIP, the State Highway Investment Proposal, which we hadn't previously been able to add into the joint draft regional land transport plan, and that was thankfully received about 3 days before submissions were due to close, and we were able to extend the consultation period, and they submitted and has made it very tight. I'll just give a heads up that when we get to submitting, once the hearings have been held, the RTCs adopt and then or recommend, and it gets adopted by council. We're very tight to time in our timelines to turn around to then submit to NZTA for inclusion in the NLTP. But it is still a lot less process work than to kind of proceed onwards and then go back and fix up what would have been a significant amount of project and financial information that wouldn't have been able to be included in the plan. That's the key import from that. And I also actually need to recognise that change to the timeline for the adoption of the NLTP, RLTP was promoted through some communications from TSIG to the Secretary of Transport and CE of NZTA. And again, a lot of that was, the charge was led, it was a group exercise, but it was largely led from work done by Russell Hawkes, who we work with at Environment Southland in the RTCs. So we've sort of want to acknowledge that work has gone on. Just a quick update, because the RLTP submissions did close, and yeah, we received some 53 submissions, and then hearings will be held at the end of May and early June for those. There's a information on which some people will have noticed, and we have had some positive feedback. We're in the early days of rollout of some e-signage in both key sites in Queenstown and Dunedin. They're fairly much trial sites at the moment, so we're assessing them as to how well they operate in the light conditions or just generally. We're receiving positive feedback, and we're getting pretty mostly good results, and we will be reporting on the wider rollout for the e-signage, but we're dependent on, we've been held up on a supply issue from overseas on the actual hardware there.
Want to ask a question?
Do you want to ask it now or do you want to wait till the end of the? Why don't we dive in there now with that?
To be honest, it's not exactly what I'd envisaged for the e-sign. But I mean, it looks very smart. I assumed it would be one you could see from a distance, 3 minutes, 6 minutes, but all the information's there, but you have to get close to it to actually read it. Is that correct?
Yes, it's yay big.
And it's immediately obvious to people. I suppose they'll get to know that's where the information is. And so you're doing a trial. Will you be analysing the incidences when the information on there is incorrect? So, for example, it says Waverley in 9 minutes and the Waverley bus doesn't turn up. Or is that not possible?
It is possible, but it's unnecessary as a separate piece of like trialing, because these signs are fed off the same feeds that feed the information that goes out on the website and the apps and information that we have now.
Okay, so you're already
X3.
doing that.
Yes. So we monitor that. The trialing is really about how well they operate. In part, it's a little bit around clarifying also the understanding with the TAs around the installation, that they are installed correctly and in the right place. There's little things like if you install the sign at the wrong end of the bus stop, so someone's reading the sign this way and the bus approaches that way, they might go, oh great, it's approaching, and they turn around and it's sailing past. So we're ironing out those things more than
that's a part of the
trialing
sort of
operation.
I'm a bit surprised because my experience with these things, you see them in the distance, you're running for the bus and you can see in the distance it's coming in 2 minutes. And you're not sure which direction it's supposed to be coming from. But anyway, so that information's been on the web. So what is the reliability of the information on that web and on that e-sign?
I can't tell you off the top of my head because I'm just not prepared for it, but we can get that information back to you.
I'd be interested because this is all about reliability, and it's really important that people get confidence. They look at that bus is 99% chance going to turn up unless it's got a flat tire, but that's based on, is it GPS on the bus that it's actual?
Yes. So the error would come if I guess if it was an operator error, a driver didn't dial into the right service.
Okay.
But then compared to how we had reliability issues with our previous RTI provider, we've vastly improved. But that's not to say it's 100%. But it around operator error and for instance, buses are being tracked. So if it is stopped because it's got a flat tire, that's showing now.
Yes.
And if there's a diversion because of roadworks, that's being tracked. It's not kind of tracking against, I guess, what would be the scheduled timetable.
Cool. But I would be interested to know in the future what the reliability of that information is.
Yeah, we'll definitely come back to you with some information on that.
Thanks, Lorraine, and
Thank
thanks,
you.
Brian. Councillor Wilson.
Well, I just want to say how impressed I am with this rollout. I think the budget was initially set for just 6 e-signs, and they may have been the size that Brian or Councillor Scott was talking about. But in reality, one can see a bus generally coming. It's the fact that we're getting so many of these, I think 70 going out in total for the same budget, and meaning that many more people will be able to have this access to this, especially if they don't have it. Data on their phones, I think is really exciting. And so I just probably want to give the other view that this is a really good pragmatic solution. So I'm really, really impressed. But am I correct about that being the alternative way forward that we've chosen?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Wilson. Anyone else? Councillor Metham.
Just that comment about data on the phone. Is there a phone app that actually tracks the buses? Is that?
Yes, we have the transit app, which you download on your phone. And there is also the council website that has tracking, which you can access through going on your phone. But a lot of the population either don't like to use data. So I guess this enables people to either check a hard copy or a timetable when they're in home and they've got access to the website. And when they get to the bus stop, if they can't see it immediately, they can double check because the information's there and it's live. But equally, with the number of people who do use the live tracking through apps or on their phone through the website, the e-signs are in a lot of cases just that backup now, where they're in.
So it's the same information from the e-sign.
Same feed, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, councillor Noon.
I'm just following up on Brian's question. With the 10 existing
E-sign.
e-signs at the bus hub, has there been any negative feedback in any way, shape or form on the way they operate?
So not significantly, however, the ones that we had installed at the bus hub didn't operate as providing live information until we changed over to our new RTI provide real-time information service provider mid last year. So they had been there for a reasonable amount of time, and they were effectively just an electronic version of a hard copy of the timetable.
A work in progress. This is public transport. No, that had you finished? Yeah, I don't know if you'd finished your report, introduction to that report.
I did just want to comment briefly on the bus stop audit, which again that is also intended to inform the further rollout of e-signs as to where they might provide the most utility or improved amenity. I think we put in some preliminary results and they may appear a bit negative in terms of the overall assessment of the bus stops, but we've done the audit, we know what they are, and we know what the issues, might be. But I also wanted just to point out that it's an audit against the public transport design guidance. They're not standards, and it's not an issue of non-compliance, and there will always be cases, especially where you've got quite an historic road network, as we do in Dunedin in particular, where we would never be able to comply with current design guidance. So if you've got a footpath that is around about 900 wide and we've got a shelter there, we're never going to be able to have the nearly 1 metre clearance that you need for a wheelchair to move in front of the shelter for that to comply with guidance. So I just wanted to add that and to note that we'll be reporting back in more detail about how we are going to use the findings to improve what we're doing and to work better with our TAs around other facilities and amenities at the stops.
Thank you. We've had a good discussion there about the new things that are coming into our system and that progress. That's great. Does anybody have any questions or anything to discuss around the GPS or the impacts of that, or the submissions that other organisations have made that we're signatory to, or anything like that, or that alignment? Happy to move. And is that a question, or is that you seconding? You have a question?
Yeah, it's a bit of a detailed one.
Microphone, please.
There was a lot of controversy around the bus stop at St Leonard's with the walkway, and has that been resolved?
I would have to come back to you just to check the details on that. I'm not aware of any ongoing issues.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I look forward to the audit. Thank you.
Councillor Meppen, then Wilson.
Thanks. Just paragraph 14 in the report. This is the first time I've come across a ship, which wasn't actually a ship. This paragraph is full of acronyms. This is a public meeting.
It's a lot of ship, is it?
Well, the NZTA as an RCA had delayed work on its SHIP until after release of the new GPS. Now, what is the SHIP? You mentioned a State Highway Investment Program. how does that
Welcome
influence
to
this?
transport planning.
Yeah,
Acronyms.
Sorry.
Thanks, Elaine. Sorry.
Yeah, and I do apologise. I did try to double check, and I was specifically asked to double check that we do always spell it out once,
Yeah,
but when you
yeah.
get down into the report, I apologise if I've missed some, and I also apologise that sometimes it's so far beyond the first time we mentioned it that you lose track of the acronym. Yeah, so the State Highway Investment Proposal, and it's that in itself has gone through several acronyms. It was for a while the WKIP, i.e. the Waka Kotahi Investment Proposal, and prior to that it used to be some other slightly different, and that's only in the last kind of 6 years. The State Highway Investment and Proposal is effectively everything that NZTA is putting into the National Land Transport Program to be funded out of the National Land Transport Fund, the same way that everything that we're doing for our PT services, we've put into our Regional Land Transport Plan to get funded out of the National Land Transport Fund. And so it's all of the Regional Land Transport Plans and the State Highway Investment Proposal that get pulled together and moderated. So all of the money that's in the GPS can only get spent on things that have collectively put into the National Land Transport Program. And so all the territorial authorities also put in their investments into our Regional Land Transport Plan, and then that gets taken up with that. But you can understand for the smaller territorial authorities across Otago and particularly Southland, and those territorial authorities whose major road network is the state highway network, the significance of what gets in the State Highway Investment Proposal to them is quite considerable, because that is 100% funded. It's the state highways, whereas anything they're putting in is only going to be subject to their, what we call the funding assistance ratio, their FAR, which is typically 51%, but is for some of those smaller councils is higher.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, have you got a question or are you willing to second?
I'm very happy to second. I thought I should, I just wanted to cover off some stuff in the South Island, if I may. Only
do.
because, as members on that and as chair, there are some really high level issues and lack of funding in the whole of the South Island in the GPS 2024. And I wanted to highlight what changes there are and what opportunities there are as well. First of all, it becomes a 10-year plan really rather than a 3-year plan, which is much better for planning. And it means that you can get a lineup of work going that may keep resources in an area. Now, yesterday we talked about a whole lot of infrastructure on the flood works needing work all at the same time. That's exactly the same with bridges and some roads in Otago and Southland, because there was a huge generation of work done in one period, and they're now coming to the end of that. And that's a problem, but it's also an opportunity. And I just wanted to say that we're really pushing that all councils put in everything that they can put in, because other opportunities through other funding sources may come up. And that's that was a clear challenge from NZTA for that. On the other hand, the lack of funding for buses and for modal shift and basically for the South Island for many projects is really challenging. There just simply isn't enough money in the National Land Transport Fund. And so I suppose why I wanted to raise these things is that Alexa and I, to a certain extent, run what we think is the best chat on the day and the position of Otago and Southland to a lesser extent. We've got Southland generally there as well. But as it's really hard because we don't have a really strategic plan about transport generally and what the opportunities are. And I think there is some work to be done there, and hence me speaking to this table about what that would look like. And some of it will come out of the regional transport plan, but not all of it will.
Thanks, Kate. Has anyone got any questions? Okay, so we've got that moved by councillor Weir, seconded councillor Wilson. Any discussion? Yep, we'll wrap it up. Put the motion. All in favour? Thank you.
I was going to say a few words to it.
Oh, you're gonna
That's
say
what
a
I meant,
few-
but
oh.
I just don't need to.
Please say a few words now, anyway.
I was just going to say that I've been receiving feedback from friends and people in the community around some of that e-signage and how useful it's been, even if you do have a phone, just makes it much easier just to glance at a screen on the stand than to need to pull out your phone if it's in your bag or something. Small differences like this are what builds up a network and something that people actually want to take. And all the other things in this paper are good news stories, so that's great to hear. Good.
Thanks, Elliot. We agreed. I don't think it's going to change anyone's vote, so that's all good. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Okay, so we'll move on to 9.2, Public Transport Network Performance Report. And who have we got coming up? Here's Julian
And Gemma.
and Gemma. Come on in. Welcome to you both. Thank you. And hello, Vagesh. I see you back there as well. Transport team's out in force today. Okay, so over to you, Gemma. We'll take it as read. It looks like it's going well. And the Unit 3 looks like we might have a problem in the reporting, which we'll discuss. Yeah, so over to you.
Good afternoon. So just before I start, I need to point out a typo, a rare typo, which is item 3 on the executive summary, which shows needing patronage at 2.1 million. It's actually 2.5 million as per the chart. Just wanted to correct that. But as you'll have noted in the report, patronage across the Otago network is, for the first 3 quarters of the year, is very strong. We anticipate record patronage by the end of the financial year for both the Dunedin and the Queenstown networks. Gemma Wilson, who's with us today, is our senior analyst and actually compiles the vast majority of this report. So she'll give you a brief summary of some of the report highlights, and as always, happy to answer any questions at the end.
Thanks, Julian. Go, Gemma.
So looking at Dunedin first, bus patronage for the year to date is over 2.5 million trips. This is a 24% increase from the previous year, noting that full timetables were reintroduced to Dunedin in February 2023. This is also a 32% increase from the 2018-19 financial year, which is the last full year where there are no COVID restrictions and driver shortages. March 2024 was the highest month on record for Dunedin, with just under 315,000 trips taken. Patronage on 3 days in February and March exceeded 14,500 trips, with the 13th of March setting a new record for the number of daily trips taken on the Dunedin network. Moving on to Queenstown, total bus patronage for the year to date is close to 1.5 million trips. This is a 63% increase from 2022-23, and noting that full timetables were only reintroduced to Queenstown in June 23, several months after Dunedin. Patronage today exceeds full year patronage for the past 4 years and is just 27,000 trips short of the previous full year high in 2018-19, meaning that year-end patronage will exceed all years since the network began. For the Queenstown Ferry, patronage and revenue remains lower than the previous year, and we think this is probably due to the return to full price fares in 2023, and together with Community Connect fares not being applied to the ferry service. For school services, patronage on school routes has increased by 19% across Otago. And for total mobility, patronage has increased by 11.7% compared to the previous year. Plus, we also signed an additional transport operator and funded a new wheelchair hoist for the existing operator.
And just to add to that, on the customer feedback section, when we have these large increases in patronage, we expect to, in return, get an increase in the feedback, both positive and negative, and the complaint levels that we get through. We haven't seen a spike in complaints or feedback that proportionally represents the increase in the patronage that we've had, which is good. We're averaging around, I think I put in the report, but 5 or 6 complaints per day, which pieces of feedback per day, not all complaints. However, we're in a period where both networks are relatively stable after a period of time last year, early last year, and briefly earlier this year in Queenstown as well, where there was some brief bits of instability and some issues that would have spiked some of that feedback. We're also currently undertaking and about to finish the surveys that we do on the Dunedin and Queenstown networks, customer satisfaction surveys, and total mobility as well. And that'll give us a flavour of how people have been feeling for the past year's transport experience. And suspect we'll probably present that at the next committee.
Thanks, Julian. Just a question from me about how those surveys are conducted. Do you go onto the buses and talk to people? Or?
Yeah, so this particular set of surveys, it's mandated by the Transport Agency, by WKNZTO. They are using a prescribed methodology. We don't choose the method, which is highly randomised set of trips across daytime, mornings, evenings, weekends, and with a minimum number of sample number to be taken as well. We normally comfortably exceed the minimum sample number. And it's on bus, so you're surveying the attitudes of people who are on the bus, using the bus. You're not surveying people who are not on the bus. Therefore, what we're not capturing is, hey, this is the reason I don't use the bus. And we've been talking, and it's in our plans. In fact, Lorraine and I were discussing this morning our plans around, non-bus user surveys, whatever you want to call them. We've been doing it for about 7 or 8 years now, so we've got a direct year-to-year comparison of what our satisfaction is like. It's actually only mandated to do it every 2 years. We do it annually because we don't really want to wait 2 years to see the movement in satisfaction and the results and so on.
Thanks, Julian. Excellent question, Andrew Noon. I just want to welcome Michael Laws because we had you down as an apology, but thank you. It's good to see you there. So Andrew and then Councillor Meehan.
Thanks, Julian. Thanks, Gemma. Hey, paragraph 57, where you just refer to one or bus operator regards to looking at customer services, part of their sort of training, etc. Do you think that will be likely that the other operator, without mentioning names, will pick up on a similar theme?
I would hope so. Yeah, the operators work in different ways, and they've both got different methods of training the staff. Where an operator proactively comes to us and goes, hey, did you know we're doing this, this and this? That's something we'll discuss across all operators, or if there's any sort of initiative that we think is a good idea to roll it, across others. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Meehan.
Just in regards, it's not in the report, but just out of interest, the B card is quite a sort of a region. I know there's other regions that use B card. But I also know the other, I think I mentioned this before in other meetings, but Wellington uses their Snapper card and various other varieties of them. And I'm aware that there is a sort of attempt to unify one card for the whole of the country. Is there anything you can say about that?
So there is a national system. We're part of that system that will integrate other regions such as Christchurch, Wellington and Auckland, along with the other regions in the B card consortium. We, unlike the B card, we're not where we were the first off the line. We're not the first region to go live, but we will be part of that system. There will be a collective system that works nationally.
It's a project that's underway at the moment. isn't
Yeah, it's
it?
been underway for some time, yeah.
We'd like to see anything
Microphone,
soon.
please.
In terms of, do you want to say in terms of?
Yeah, so the project is being run and led by the NZTA, National New Zealand Transport Agency, and because as Julian mentioned, we are the lead agency for the RITS, the Regional Integrated Ticketing system. We will go last because we're sort of the operator of that group at the moment. And at this point in time, that is looking around 2026 with the early PTAs being Canterbury going in probably as we speak in the next month or two. So there'll be learnings from that for the rest of us.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, Councillor Weir.
Got a few. I'm just wondering if there are any for those feedback, which is obviously not all complaints, but wondering if there's a breakdown by the operator for the service that those complaints were on. Just think if it was broken down by or even by route, and then obviously you can look at the companies that run that unit. Just wondering if we'd see any significant difference between the two.
Yeah, look, so the data is there for us to differentiate between operator and route. If we were to differentiate by route in a sort of public forum, then you could also determine the operator. We don't might present that by operator. But yeah, there is there, but we we're not putting that in the public forum.
Yeah.
Okay. I think ideally in Dunedin in particular, not in Queenstown. So when Queenstown launched as an all-bus brand, it happens to have one operator. Dunedin used to have 2 or 3 operators, and when all-bus brand moved to here, we see, in terms of what the customer sees, they see the all-bus brand rather than individual bus companies. Although from the way we manage our contracts and the performance and the feedback and that sort of stuff, it's important for us to know that information. But for the customer experience, we want it to be uniformly good across all bus. Yeah.
There's no routes that jump out as problems or anything.
No, there's not. Definitely not a particular route that there may be routes that maybe for other reasons that aren't connected to the operator, maybe antisocial behaviour, certain ones that where we might target with on bus security and things like that, but not nothing else.
And then
Thank you.
continue.
Oh, you got another one?
Sorry.
Go.
For the driver behaviour feedback, do we have any idea what portion of that is positive versus negative?
Not to ham, but it's not significantly different. We obviously there's a tendency that people are unhappy with stuff, maybe more likely to about any aspect of anything, more likely to find a complaint or writing than a positive thing. But we do get a lot of positive feedback, both on social media and direct messages, including today actually on Facebook. We saw a couple, and what we do make sure is that gets passed back to the operator and directly to the driver so that they receive that feedback, because it's they do a difficult job, it's challenging at times, and they often hear a lot of the noise, but not the fact that the vast majority of passengers are happy.
Yeah, that's
Okay. And then I was also just going to ask if we have any if you have any idea what the feedback from the transit app looks like. Because I know, when you open that app, you get prompted with some questions about the conditions of the bus and the bus stops and all that. I'm wondering if that.
I see that particular aspect. Yeah. So we if I understand what you're talking about, the app itself, as you use it as a user, you have different things you can do on the bus. Like you can say, hey, it's full, or there's plenty of seats, or there's wheelchair space available, or there was a broken bus shelter, those sort of things. So what we're seeing is a lot of people actually use that, and it can actually be a helpful tool because it's measuring stuff that isn't actually obvious unless you're in the bus or at the bus shelter. So we do not there was a cost associated with gathering that data, as in a subscription to the council. We actually had a short presentation on that aspect of things a month or so ago, so we're looking at that internally at the moment, but we don't currently collect that data from out of the app. Yeah.
So it's just sitting with the transit app currently, but we could choose to get that if we want.
We could choose to, yeah.
Great, thank you very much. That was good stuff to clarify. I've got one more clarifying one. On Route 3, with does that mean that because there was an issue getting the B card monitoring in place, does that mean we're just simply not collating the info and not collecting the money on that route? Is that why we can answer
Unit
down?
3.
Was it Unit 3?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Figure 3, yeah. So just a couple of things on that. The picture is a snapshot which represents March, not the year to date. So at that point in time, the EV fleet was being switched over from the diesel fleet, including the ticketing equipment and that sort of thing. We think there may be an error in the data, which is I flagged in the commentary, and I think it's related to a lag in the data coming out of the machines being, but we're not 100% sure on that, which is why I think. But it could also just be a data issue. If you look at the graph at the bottom, that shows I think Unit 3 is the grey line, that shows that the performance of that unit tracking over time. So you see it actually goes up quite steeply between February and March 2024.
Yeah.
What the box above is telling us is that it's lower than March 2023. So there are other possible things we just need to look into. March 2023 could have been a very strong year for some reason, month for some reason. So yeah, it looks like a bit of an anomaly in itself but it's in comparison to last year, but actually it's still performing quite well if you see what I mean.
So it could fully be a glitch.
It could be a glitch as well, yeah.
With no impact on actual numbers or
I don't believe so.
revenue. Okay, that's great. We'll leave that there for now.
Yeah.
The only other thing that I wanted to note in here was the Queenstown ferries, and what a timely reminder that is of that fine balance between what you charge and what you charge between patronage and fares. It's a very fine line, so we have to think very carefully when we do anything to fares, because they're really well thought out, and we tread a fine line there. I just wondered if you could confirm that for me. That viewers.
I think there are fares are important, and there are a number of factors that drive demand, a number of different levers and other matters. But the difference between the ferries and the bus network is, and what we think is the reasoning behind the patronage performance on the ferry is, for a long period of time there've been half price fares across the network, but in Queenstown as well. For Dunedin, for Queenstown, for your adult fare would have been $1. It's gone back up to $2. For the ferry, it went
5 to
from
10.
5 to 10, and so the quantum is quite a lot different. $5 may encourage more people to use the ferry during last year that weren't previously. Then that change to 10 is quite high, but also importantly, some of the concessions and things that such as Community Connect and free under 13 fares and the bits and pieces that were in place don't necessarily apply to the ferry. The ferry service themselves also have a part in this. They look at setting the fare, and they used to offer concessions as well, which their own ones, multi-trip concessions, which they don't do. So there are lots of factors of which price is an element.
Okay, so it's a factor.
Yeah.
And amongst others. So have we seen that patronage move to the buses, or has it just evaporated?
It's really hard to determine whether that patronage is, well, we can't determine that patronage has moved to the buses. It's a similar question about the new more-skilled routes of the previous PATC, because the patronage is growing so strongly anyway that any movement from a ferry which only has a very small capacity in comparison to the bus network will be not very noticeable on the bus network in terms of the growth we're having at the moment anyway. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Look, Your question has prompted me to wonder, and it's something I should have known, but I don't, is the other factor that makes a difference is how long something takes. And I'm just wondering how long the ferry takes compared to the bus, if the bus is actually running. I mean, the ferry doesn't get held up in roadworks, which is wonderful, but it occurs to me that I would have thought that the ferry was time efficient, but I may have that wrong, and I don't know what the time difference is on the longest haul, say from Frankton to the centre of town.
I would believe, or at least definitely at peak time, the ferry would be quicker.
A lot quicker, actually.
Yeah. There was
10 minutes.
The bus service in Kelvin Heights doesn't go direct to town, so it would require a change and a short wait at the Frankton hub to get onto the second bus. But the buses, like every other vehicle in Queenstown, those peak hours get stuck in the congestion in and out of town along the Ladies Mile.
Are there any capacity constraints in the ferries at peak hour?
Not that we're aware of, other than the fact they're limited in terms of their size anyway, which is, I can't remember off the top of my head, I think it's around 30 odd passengers.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
From what you're saying, it'd be, if they could put a lot more on, it would be efficient for that hour. But I appreciate that you want to have a size of boat that's working all of the time, not just the peaks. But I just interested in understanding what that dynamic is. Thank you.
Thanks, team. Okay, can I have a mover and a seconder, please?
Happy to move, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Noon, Councillor Meffin. Mover and seconder, all in favour, please say
Can I
aye.
make a brief comment, please?
Brief comment, yes,
Very,
please.
very
I
briefly,
forgot to
just
let somebody do that
great-
before.
Great outcome, really impressive data here in front of us in relation to bus patronage and total mobility patronage. Very, very impressive, and I imagine it's unprecedented and probably the best in the country at the moment. So congratulations to all, not only within the organisation, but people out there that are prepared to make that change. And we've still got capacity, so don't hold back. If you're keen to take the bus, don't hesitate, get into it.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And we'll move on now to a report, which I really seriously thank you for this report, the cruise ship season, because this was causing a lot of angst to passengers on Route 14, I think it is. And so it's very, very good to see that this team has been responsive and come up with solutions that seem to be getting a long way towards answering that problem. Do we thank you for this, Navesh? Oh, sorry.
We do.
We thank you for this, and oh yeah, I haven't met you before, I don't think, but welcome to this table, and please tell us what went right. So we only too often hear what went wrong, but it looks like a lot's gone right with this.
So I'll hand over to Sumit shortly, but just in summary, we've like I say, we've reached the end of another really busy cruise ship season. It's the first one that's been supported by a public transport plan. Following the previous season, and it's well publicised feedback around public transport difficulties, congestion, and so on. I gave the task of coming up with a plan to Sumit, one of our implementation advisors, and my guidance was pretty much just get it sorted. And Sumit has entirely led the process from start to finish, and he'll give you a brief summary very shortly. Just before that, I thought I'd mention I accompanied Sumit to a debrief meeting with Port Otago last week. I was really proud to hear the positive experiences their management fed back to us, not just their own experiences, their feedback they got from the local community, and the feedback about Sumit actually. We're not resting on our laurels. There'll no doubt be some issues that we aren't aware of and adjustments to future plans that need to be made, but overall we're pretty positive about the way things went, and I'll hand you over to Sumit to explain more.
And thank you for that, and welcome. And certainly my inbox thanks you, because it was very full this time last year with issues. There's still the odd thing that obviously happens. It is public transport after all, and you're trying to deal with a peak demand that is almost impossible to deal with. But over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Port Chalmers has seen significant disruption to its bus service in recent years due to increasing numbers of cruise ship passengers choosing the O bus service to get to and from Dunedin. In the 2022-23 season, there were attempts to add capacity with overflow buses, but they were introduced midway through the season and compounded with the national driver shortage at the time, it was last year. This season is the first time ORC has introduced a full service program to support local network capacity at Port Chalmers during cruise ship season. It was planned well in advance of the start of the season by collaboration and discussion with the key parties such as DCC, Port Otago, Ritchie's Transport and local community stakeholders to develop a cruise ship action plan. This plan involves scheduling additional services determined by this ship capacity, arrival time, date, and other factors, together with providing mechanism to sell tickets off the bus to reduce delays in loading buses. In terms of patronage, cruise ship gets generated nearly 16,000 additional passenger trips on the O bus network. The result of this has been positive with the significant good community feedback and with the minimal complaints related to the Route 14 services throughout the season. We will learn from the experience of the season. It was not perfect, and we will incorporate improvements and improvements into our planning for next season for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Any questions from around the table? Councillor Murphy.
Yeah, I'm just interested in this service as being a revenue generating service. I mean, these passengers coming in are still getting what I think is a good service for only a few dollars. Is the fare that's set for cruise ship passengers, is it envisaged that it could be sort of supplementing public transport fares around Dunedin?
At the moment, it's a cash fare, so the fare charge was the cash fare equivalent.
Could I just add, it's a bit hard to differentially treat riders of the network. So although these people are coming from cruise ships, they are public transport users, and we didn't run the services exclusively for them. They were services that the local people would get on and off. We did run, as Julian mentioned, the $3 adult cash fare, but we managed to set up actually to sell a return ticket. So I guess, if you like, they were paying the full fare that anyone would pay on one of our buses in Dunedin.
So you don't see this as an opportunity?
It's not that it's not an opportunity, but it has to be a decision of council as to how we set fares. So, for instance, in Queenstown, we have a zone for the airport, so that picks up a $10 adult, $8 child or youth cash fare to and from the airport, because it's a zone. But other than that, the current policy of the council is that we run this flat fare structure, which is the based on the $2 adult fare for the B card, $3 in Dunedin for cash, and $4 in Queenstown with concessions or alterations set against that regime.
So in terms of a cruise ship passenger buying a fare, they're using, but they're not using a B card, obviously, because they won't have one. How does it work? I mean, how does the payment of it? How's it facilitated?
So what we an adaptation that we did this year was we were having them buy the cash fares. Last year they bought them on the bus, and that caused significant delays because they didn't have the right change, they didn't have the right currency, and it was a cash transaction every time. So our first change this year was to start selling those cash tickets off site. So just around the corner, they would come into a room and buy their tickets and then get on. But then we actually got a ticket machine where we could sell a return fare, which was an adjustment that we made. And so that enabled them to get their whole day's travel or at one place and outside the queues on the buses, either at Port Chalmers or in town. Just to note that in that Queenstown where we have the airport, it's a zone, whereas Port Chalmers, the buses don't go onto the port itself. So the stop where cruise ship passengers, as opposed to other public transport users, catch the bus is the same stop. And and so that's why the mechanism was to apply the fare that we have for cash fares, but we had it, as I said, sort of bought slightly offline rather than on the bus.
So the facility still exists, though, if these people are buying fares in a different place, the facility exists to actually charge a different fare, doesn't it?
It's not easy because you have to have a delineation mark between where your fare applies, because you can't apply it to types of travellers, for instance.
But we do have it in Queenstown by what we've got around that by, a lot of people use that airport bus stop as their commute. But with the B card, they pay the B card fare, but with cash on that route, they pay the higher $10 cash fare. So it is possible if we considered it.
But the airport is a zone, if you like.
That's right, but you
our
could make
fare
that a
structure.
zone to Port Chalmers, couldn't you? Could do. It's complex.
So long as you don't catch the locals.
Way to not catch the locals, is that. Councillor Wilson, I know that you're there. Do you want to contribute on this discussion?
Oh, look, I most of the stuff is in the report, and it's a really good report, and I'm just absolutely delighted with the flexibility that the staff showed during they obviously changed things and ramped them up, and it's an amazingly flexible and pragmatic staff moves, and I'm really delighted with it, and how well it worked. The idea that we're trying to capture people who are tourists just because they get off a boat as opposed to flying in seems odd to me. The fact is that there's a service and we're providing a service and we have to move people. Otherwise, they'll get into cars and taxis, and people look on the internet and work out the cheapest route. Why would we try and force them onto the other routes? And this is the problem. I think it's been a brilliant result. What I'm concerned about is the actual cost, and I presume the 95,000 in there of staff time, and it's a huge investment on getting the service to work well, so it's not absolutely cost. The question is, will that be an ongoing one every year, or is that just part of setting up what looks like a much better system, presuming cruise ships continue, and won't be as much every year? Because I don't think it's something we can sustain long term if it's an annual cost.
So the 95,000 was the cost of operating and running all the services.
Sorry, apologies. Sorry, no. So it says excluding. Yeah. So so what is the internal staff time? So that sentence I read with not seeing. I didn't enlarge my screen to see the comma, but it does say excluding internal staff time.
We haven't pulled out the actual staff time spent on this work. It just sits in our Dunedin network operating environment, because I guess we treated it like it is part of the network, and it's a route improvement for Route 14 as opposed to a specific project.
It wasn't a substantial amount of money, and presumably it will carry on. Now that we've got those learnings, it won't be substantial.
So as we've mentioned, we're not going to rest on our laurels. It went well, but there's some further improvements to be made. But we could say that across the whole network, and we'll keep doing that. but obviously the learnings that we have from this year and the successes that we did have this year will make it a lot less onerous next year. And then the other thing that I would say is that the relationships that in particular Summit and Julian built up will also mean that it will be an easier process going forward.
So, and I'm sorry, I do understand. I had marked this, and I'm sorry to report that 95,000 out, because that's clearly it's just the way it's written. But it is important to know how much time is used, because this is an opportunity cost that hasn't gone into other planning, and there are many other services that we want to ensure are well planned, and I just want to make sure that we're not putting so much into this that we're not improving services on other routes as well, and that we understand the opportunity cost, I suppose. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Wilson. Who've we got? Richard, hello. Thank you.
Yeah, I just really quickly on that one, and I do agree with Kate, but I think it's important that we also consider the amount of time that staff were spending on this issue last season when we didn't have it resolved. And so spending that time this season and getting that process right will mean in future seasons that time becomes available to focus on exactly what Kate has mentioned, which is other issues. So I think, and it's really pleasing to hear the support for the work the staff have done, because I think it's been a really real highlight for us this year, and they've done a great job. And by establishing the process now, that time will free up in future years, and we can tick off a few more of the priorities that we've got as an organisation on other routes or on other projects. Thanks, Alexa.
Thank you, and agreed. This has been a really, really, really good response. I'm going to Councillor Scott, then Councillor Weir, and then Councillor Summerton.
Cool. Yeah, no, I concur with the positive comments. This has gone from an embarrassment to a good news story. So genuinely, thank you very much. Well done. Just two numbers stood out for me. One is that actually the number of cruise ship passengers is less than 1% of our total passengers that we take on our buses. So, part of me sort of thinks, why do we bother? I'm just a bit surprised. For all the angst that went around it, was less than 1% of our passengers. Do we have a comment on that?
I think less than 1% on I haven't checked that figure, but assuming it's correct, on a single route with a half-hourly frequency in a popular area, the benefits they don't really apply to the scale in terms of the quantum of the whole network size. So yeah.
Anyway, that was a bit of a surprise to me. I hadn't realised. Anyway, and the other thing is that of the 15,669 additional trips, potentially, there were 41 vessels with over 2,000 people each, over 80,000 passengers, and that in itself was only 40% of the 100 cruise ships. But we're only actually getting 20% of the cruise ship passengers are coming on our bus system, only 20%.
Yeah.
And as I said, there's the other 60 cruise ships is not taken into account on that. So that was a bit of a learning for me as well, in terms of going back to Tim's point, is there an opportunity, or is that all private buses, separate bus system off to Larnax Castle, this type of thing?
Yeah, there are a multitude of options for people when they get off the cruise ship. So the key thing is getting off the cruise ship, because not everyone actually does.
Yeah.
And the weather and so on also affects things a lot. But I think there's also there's a number of factors. But up until a couple of years ago, this actually wasn't an issue for us. And whether it's awareness of the public transport network, which I'd like to think it is, or for other reasons, there's been a ramp up in the popularity and the issues associated with that on the network over the last maybe 3 years or so, that we didn't experience to this level in the past. So it's a matter of that balancing act between providing something that caters for those numbers and also means that our local users don't miss out.
Cool. Thank you very much. Thanks for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Somerville.
Yes, I think I agree. It's excellent that we've managed to do this to provide that continuing good service for our local Route 14 passengers, which I think is the point as far as I'm concerned. I was going to ask, was rail used at all for cruise ship transport this season? And I know we wouldn't have been running that at all.
Have you said
Do you want to answer that?
So the rail was used, but they have the private tours organized. So it's only was for few ships, not for all the ships.
Right, okay, so not a public service by any means. Yeah, okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. Are you okay with it as it is, or do you want to?
It's just changing a word.
Okay, councillor Weir would like to make a tiny change to the recommendation to note the report.
Yeah, I'm happy. If no one's got any more questions, happy to move that. I was just gonna move it, amending paragraph 24, because it says transport staff will meet with Port Otago in late April. Proposed season 2. That's just changing that to meet. Changing will meet to meet.
Oh, to
Yeah,
meet,
already met.
yes,
Yeah.
that's good. Thank you. On point 24, and you're going to move the motion?
Happy to if no one's got any more questions.
Councillor Noon will second it. Do you have anything else to say on that?
Yeah, I'll cover that off a little bit. Sure. I'll just quickly jump to that like 1% figure. Because if cruise ship passengers are 1% of the total passengers we've got for the Dunedin network, that's probably, that route's probably around 4% of the total network at a very rough guess, given we've got 20 or so routes, and that means that 1% is a quarter of that route. And that's happening over a concentrated period of time in the year, over a concentrated times of the day, and that concentration is what disrupts the network for locals who rely on that network, which is probably the main reason we're trying to fix that problem and spend that money. And it's not a completely solved issue, but it's infinitely better than last year. From seeing it myself and hearing from people, or not hearing as much from people this year. And that return fare, I think, was a really, really good idea in terms of fixing that crowding at the bus hub and New World. Port Otago agreeing to contribute and pay the estimated increased costs that the cruise ships cause, I think, is a really good thing to get across the line. Pragmatic solution to the sort of perceived unfairness of that spend. And it avoids any need to sort of try and charge them a differentiated rate or anything like that. I would think means that we can continue these remedial works in future years, and as Staff and Richard mentioned, probably needing less planning to do that sort of ongoing stuff in future years, but still stuff we need to do. So thanks, team. That's a massive win for us, I think. So
yeah, and thank you. If we endorse those comments, can all in favour put the motion?
Aye.
Thank you. Did you get the movement seconded? Oh, good, thanks. Okay, we'll move on now, and thank you, Sarah. That was really, really good work. And welcome, Jack Cowie. This is for the transport procurement strategy, new approval. We need to endorse some changes.
Happy to move.
Thanks, Kate. We'll just hear from Jack anyway, but that's great. Thank you, Kate.
Well, on that sentiment, I won't talk for too long. I did just notice looking at this that I didn't put the date in correctly at the top of the report, so I apologise for that. So this is just a kind of background for approval, and this was because we had to make a few changes, mostly technical, minor changes to the procurement strategy that we wrote. And the feedback talking to Richard was that while we had a delegation to make editorial changes, some of them were probably marginally too large. There's nothing controversial or addressing the major topics of discussion, just a few omissions on my part that were excluded and a few corrections that have emerged from discussions with NZTA. So if anyone has any questions to discuss on it, I'm happy to talk over, or if Kate's approach is taken, I'm happy with that.
Before we, do you want to second it, or do you have a question?
I'm going to see if it was a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Thanks, Jack. 7.9. So I'm looking at the under discussion and down the bottom. Procurement program 7.9. I just wanted to understand the inventory that you've got there.
Microphone.
Oh, sorry.
7.9.
Procurement program. Under the change that you suggest with the wording, what does that actually mean in terms of the timeline? Are you suggesting an amendment that aligns with the two contracts that exist in Queenstown, or does it mean something else?
So the feedback from that one on NZTA was they simply want the document to be a little bit clearer in saying that we need to do some more advanced work on that depot before we really get into doing it. So I don't think that's inconsistent with how we were already thinking about it, but the phrasing has changed to make it clearer in response to the NZTA feedback. So I don't think there's any change in intent, but it's sort of separating out the planning for the depot work from the actual depot work a bit more clearly for NZTA's feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Weir. To come back to you, Councillor Wilson.
Great.
Just on, I think these are minor editorial changes, but if there's anything you'd highlight that is perhaps a bit bigger, I'd be curious to hear. But otherwise, just under 2.2, the adding comment around our end of contract transfer provisions or consideration of that for the buses.
Yes.
I'm just wondering if the transport team has had any consideration of, I assume that's just what happens to the buses, the non-electric ones once they're all electric. I had a few people asking me that.
So this is more with regards to what you do with electric buses at the end of contract, and there's some anxieties within the industry that the full value of electric buses won't decline over the course of the contract, and so then when the contract expires, it's quite unclear whether that diminishing value of the bus is correctly taken into account in the contracts. And so having transfer provisions is an option which is not currently being utilised, but it's an option to essentially say, hey, we can transfer these buses over to the new operator, and it just reduces some of the risks around the end of contract transition and the cost of electric buses. So this is and the NZTA guidelines, they say this is one way you deal with some of these issues in a reasonably straightforward way. And some of the feedback through the process was that this is kind of the easier way to do things than more complicated approaches, especially with the fleet and with the day-to-day limitations of our capacity. Through the process, I kind of got feedback encouraging that sort of approach.
Is that restricted to other operators, or could that be us as a council?
That would be to be determined in procurement planning processes. I think the general assumption is that it would be between the old operator and the new operator, but it might not formally have to say that, and it might allow for alternative options if council were to take that up in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Did you have something else there?
I'm blaming Andrew Noon on this. If you go back to 121, which is 7.9, page 121,
yep.
On the very first line there, I presume it's the ferry unit procurement. And we're not procuring a ferry per se.
Ooh.
But anyway.
You said probably. I think we're scrolling to get the page, but I think you'd be right.
There's a bit pedantry issue.
No, correct.
Sorry, and look, I've reread this, and I know that we did it last time, but what is this? I'm going to reiterate the fact that this is building in a lot more flexibility and some really good thinking of planning. Really delights me. So I'm really looking forward to how the staff working together in the awesome way they obviously have given the previous reports, this is a really good opportunity for us to make some really good inroads, hopefully with the government, and transport planning for Otago. So it's really, really exciting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. So you're moving, Councillor Wilson, you're seconding, Councillor Noon. I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. And I believe that brings us to a close, but I really do, again, thank the transport team, done a great job. And it's awesome to see the flexibility and the movement we're getting. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. Thank you to everyone online. And I'll just close with karakia. We've got nothing else happening today, so that'll be right. Okay, kia taute, orangi mare, o te iwi, o te ao. O ngā.
Kia ora.
Thank you.